He's right there.
This episode of the Bucktails podcast is brought to you by Pistol Creek and Decked Out John Boat.
Pick his head up. Yeah. Look at that. Woo. Good deer, babe.
On today's episode of Bucktails podcast, episode 13, I interview my old friend Tyler Trammell. His family runs Trammell Tire Pros here in Dahlonega, Georgia, and he kills a great Dahlonega deer. So just tune in, listen in, let me know what you guys think. I'm here with Tyler Trammell. He killed a 141 2/8 deer here in Lumpkin County a few weeks ago with his bow. A giant deer for anywhere really, but especially for Lumpkin County. Here in Lumpkin County, it's usually 100 or 110 inch buck is a giant. You know, that's a big one. So 140 and above is unheard of, really. I mean, it happens every few years, maybe, but we'll get into that later on. But wanted to tell you guys how I know Tyler. We've known each other since my brother and him played 8 and under, 10 and under Little League. So baseball way back in the day, park and rec ball here in Lumpkin County. Then Tyler played for the high school team too, and I kept stats. And then they own a tire shop here in town, Trammell Tire Pros. And I buy my tires from them. They change my oil. So we see each other pretty regularly, too often, really, if I had to be honest. But yeah, so that's kind of how I know Tyler. He's a staple in the community, him and his dad. And it's some family run Trammell Tire Pros. So it's a great place to be. But yeah, so that's kind of how I know Tyler. So we'll get into, I want to ask Tyler, how did you start hunting? Like, do you have a hunting club? Did you hunt private land? You know, who kind of got you started hunting?
It's kind of crazy. My dad he hunted, I think, when he was younger, but I never really hunted much until really after high school. My cousin, Ryan Simmons, who also works at Trammell Tire, is a tight family business. He actually was the first one that ever took me hunting. And I kind of showed interest in shooting bows, and we, started doing that. And, naturally started hunting from there. And he was the one that kind of taught me the, ins and outs of everything, and, how to look for sign, that kind of stuff. Funny story on that. The first time he ever took me, he was kind of showing me like what to look for, the signs you have. And little did I know, on the way out there, he had stopped and got like a bag of raisinets and like was walking out there. And he was like, look right there. He's like, that's, like deer poop. And like, he's like, if you taste it, you can tell if it's a buck or a doe. And I like looked and I was like, what? Are you kidding me? And he like picked one up and he just kind of like slid, I guess, a raisinette down into his hand. And he like acted like he ate it. And he's like, that's definitely a buck. He's like, you got to sit here. And like at that moment, I was like, man, I don't know if this is for me. He's like, I don't think I can do that. And he let it go that whole evening. And then later that night, he asked me, he's like, man, did you ever try those deer droppings? And I was like, no, I don't think I did. And he like slid that bag out. And he's like, well, good. He's like, I didn't either. He's like, there's no way. So, but that was like he was the first one that kind of introduced me to it. And then, that's kind of been it. I'm really kind of the only one other than him that hunts in my family. And from that first time, I've been hooked ever since. Learn more every time I go. So yeah, it's fun. I absolutely love it.
Nice. How old were you when he took you on that raisinette adventure?
I would have been either 18 or 19. So, I was fresh out of high school. So, and I'm now almost 32. So.
Gotcha. That's interesting because, some of the people I've interviewed, it's, from the time they're 5 or 6. That's pretty neat that you started later on and you've, been pretty successful since you've been hunting. But no, that's pretty neat.
Yeah, no, I was more than blessed to get a chance at a deer like this. I killed my first buck that year, later in the year, and it was like a little 5-pointer. But it was cool. I was proud of it. I hunted all year, and at the very end of season, I got him with my bow. And then for probably 2 or 3 maybe even four more years, I didn't kill a deer at all, because I was waiting to get a good mature deer, and learned a ton, what did work, what didn't work, places to be, situations not to hunt. And I think it was 2019. I actually tagged out that year. I got 2 bucks that year, one from a place in Oakwood that I hunt, this private land, and then another one off this same tract of land that I got the deer I shot this year. And it was real. I'll never forget that, because one, my wife was with me, so she got to see that, and it was on my birthday. And that's a whole nother story too. So we'll have to save that for another podcast maybe. But yeah, this was just I guess an accumulation of time and effort, trials, and everything that did and didn't work leading up to this. And there was a chance at this earlier, a couple days before I actually killed him, that I was not able to nail down a shot. So, but we'll get into that, I guess, as we go on leading up to it. But it's been cool.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Like I said, it's different so far. I'm pretty early in this podcast game. I think you're going to be episode number 13, but a lot of the people I've interviewed have hunted for a long time. So it's pretty interesting to see, someone who started at 18, pretty much an adult. It's interesting to see, I'm sure your maturation process was a lot faster than someone who started at, 5 years old. So you learned a lot really quick because, cognitively you can understand, okay, this makes more sense than that does. So that's pretty awesome. But yeah, I mean, if you want to go ahead and jump into the story, I'm not sure the exact date that you killed your deer. I'll pull it up here on my end as far as I'll share my screen and show it. But if you want to go ahead and start your story of this buck, you said it was 141 2/8 unofficial. So if that score holds, that's number 2 in Lumpkin County. So just for reference, for those of you that are listening, it's doesn't happen very often to kill this caliber of a deer, especially with the bow. I mean, it's a giant. So if you want to go ahead and start your story of this one, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I hunted not necessarily this deer last year, but I knew he was in this general area. And he was a good deer. He was a good solid 8-pointer. And I got pictures of him, morning and night. He was coming regularly, but I never could nail down actually seeing him when I was hunting. So I don't know if it was something where the situations never just were lining up. He was winding me, bad luck. He may have had me, on a schedule just like I had him. But it's easy to say looking back on it that, I'm glad that deer didn't get killed because I never had the opportunity. But I guess as I'm learning more, this is why you kind of let deer grow too, because I'm thinking this deer was probably a 4-year-old, and what he did from 3 to 4 was insane. And I'll make sure I share a picture, that way you can include that too, of what he was just in January at the end of last year, as far as hunting season, just to see what he did in those few short months as far as growth, because it was pretty spectacular. But I got pictures of him all summer. I pulled out of that area. I didn't pressure it too much as far as being in and out of there until probably about a month or so before season started, and set up all my stuff, started getting pictures, and he was there pretty quick. And, of course, as soon as I saw trail cam pictures, I was like, holy cow, this deer has exploded. So I was like, I'm after that deer. I pretty much put everything else to the side. That other spot in Oakwood that I hunt, it's got great deer also, but nothing like this. So put in all my effort there, kind of started getting a game plan of where I wanted to be. This general area in Lumpkin, it's a 18-acre tract that my father owns, and it's a neat spot in the sense that it's subdivision, but it's not like I'm walking in and, going in some garden hunting like a half acre to an acre, where you can still see completely wooded. It's really neat. Just the way the track is, it's got a creek that, kind of flows from the top to the bottom. A lot of good hardwoods, pines. I mean, everything that would be, a deer's home is there. So I positioned kind of two different spots. I have a hang on stand that I would go and climb in, and I would hang it down by the creek. And last year, that's where I had to kind of get to see any kind of action at all. So I kind of planned that that's probably where I was going to have to get to kill that deer, and it's a lot deeper, harder to get in there without running deer off. And then I had a blind set up that was in an area that I learned just in that spot, the deer never noticed it. They never paid any attention. It was well hidden. I had great cover. And that's kind of where I was going to start at. And so that's kind of how I set the area up. And it's kind of a funnel the way this property works. They kind of move up from the creek up in, and they kind of run the edge of this pasture, which leads them out of that track up into kind of really the main subdivision where they just kind of hang out in all the pastures and, whatnot and feed up there. So it's kind of like a transfer spot, really, where they come in from probably bedding, they go out feed, and they come back. And so that was my game plan. And leading up to, I guess, opening week, he was coming morning and night and stayed there for a pretty good amount of time. So I knew I had a pretty solid chance at this deer early. He was hanging out with a little bachelor group. So he was still summer patterns, and, the chances were looking good anyway. So my game plan was that first weekend I was going to go and I hunted out of that hang on, which just because I was able to get there at good times of the day and sit out there for a long time. And the first night, conditions were right, wind was good. So sat in there, and deer just started coming in immediately, which I can't confirm that deer was there that night, but I'm pretty sure he was in the area because that same group of bucks moved up to where I was. But I positioned myself wrong. I kind of positioned myself with my back to where they would come. That way I was hoping they'd come by me, and then I'd have a better shooting area to where I figured they would be moving in. And I don't know if they were able to smell me or if maybe I moved or flinched. Something had them freaked out that night, and they never would come in. So I didn't see anything that night. And so kind of went back home, kind of rethought, my game plan. And then the next morning I started getting cell cam pictures where they were back in the area, same group of bucks, which I saw them that night, the smaller ones. And I was like, all right, that was that same group. So, I mean, there's a good chance that he's still with them. And it was a couple days later. So I guess this would be the second week of bow season. And it would have been Sunday night. Sunday night, I actually moved to the blind. So I'm just going to try it, see if that fixes, the way they can move in, if they're more comfortable. And lo and behold, maybe it was about 6:45, right at 7, deer start funneling in like crazy. They start coming in left and right. So I'm like, all right, everything looks good. Does start coming in, feeding, not a worry in the world. They're calm. Well, 1 buck, 2 buck, 3. There was, a good 8-pointer he was with, a real good 6 that will be a great deer in a couple of years probably. And they moved in, and then a couple smaller ones, and they're kind of, doing what they do. They're kind of like, trying to show dominance, and they're messing around with each other. And then boom, here he is. He shows up exactly the way I expect him to come in. And he moves in about 50 or 60 yards. So, I mean, nothing comfortable yet. And he moves in, and then he stays with these 2 other bucks. And Eli, I mean, it was like he knew everything he needed to do to not be in a shot. It was like they would move over to the left, and he would stay right in between them. Like no shot ever. And they honestly like zigzagged through my shooting lane like that for a good probably 20, 25 minutes. And they moved in. The closest I had them was like 35, maybe 40 yards. And it never presented itself. And it was probably the most frustrating, like nerve-wracking. My legs, like I was having to hold my knees down because my knees were like shaking so bad. Because I was so amped up because I thought I was going to get the shot. I thought I had a chance at this deer. And there was a split second where he was like just past being straight on to me, just like quartering to me. And like for a split moment, like I thought, I was like, do you try it? But I'm like, at the same time, do you take a shot like that? One, I mean, injure the deer. That's like worst case scenario. And then, it runs off and you don't recover it. And that's wasted meat, wasted deer. Or, I mean, you just blow it completely. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that could go wrong. And that's stuff from, learning, hearing other people talk, watching other hunting shows. Which, side note and whatnot, as far as learning, what we were talking earlier, that Hunting Public show I watch religiously. So that's always been cool to learn stuff from them, because they talk a lot and they teach a lot during their show too. So that's always been neat. But to get back on that deer, unfortunately, that night, I watched him walk away, all the way up through the pasture. And I mean, my heart was broke. To see a deer like that in person was insane. To watch him walk through the woods, but to watch him walk away was very tough. And I had my tail tucked walking out of there that night. The only good thing that I took out of it, because I called a good buddy of mine, Trevor Udy, who's another local hunter that, I've learned a lot from talking to him too, from his failures and successes. Was, the best thing that could have happened. I didn't take a bad shot. I didn't spook the deer, and he left without a worry, and I left with, so it did mess up the spot. So I came home that night and just lost sleep over that, just trying to think of everything I could have done right, different, to present like a better situation. And I really couldn't think of one. So I gathered myself back up, went out the next night, nothing, didn't show, which the chances of him coming back again were pretty slim. I was like, I'll never see this deer again. But I knew my only chances were to get in there every night. I would leave work at 5:30 and I could be in that stand, quiet by 5:50, because I would time myself to see, just, keeping track of how everything was moving. 2 nights went by, no, not seeing him. And then the night that I killed him, I was in the deer stand. 5:52 is what I looked at, I believe, on my watch. I remember it like it was like everything was in slow motion that night. I got there, it was dead calm, not a stick of wind, nothing. 20 minutes went by. All of a sudden, like the wind, like the trees started bowing over, the wind started swirling. I was like, there's no way. I was like, if they're in, because it's hot on top of everything else, so I've been sweating walking in. The conditions just seem like this is not going to be good. There's no chance these deer are going to move tonight. So I didn't see any deer. I think I actually saw a stray doe. I take that back. And she kind of came in, but she was all freaked out. It was almost like she was smelling me or smelling something. So they were just all sketchy. She left, and I went probably 45 minutes, maybe an hour. It was right at 7 before all of a sudden the wind stopped. It went dead calm again. And then it was like the woods came to life. Those moved back in. A couple small bucks that I'd been seeing around, they moved in and started feeding. And then the one 8-pointer that he'd been hanging around with, he moved in. And they came in one by one from that creek bottom, just as I'd been expecting. One by one after another, the 6, another 4, and I think a 5. Started doing the same thing. Started, kind of messing around with each other. There's some like real low-lying cover over to the right of where I was sitting. Some like vines and stuff that they're over there messing around with. And so they hung around in there for a while, 10 or 15 minutes. And then right at about 7:15, here he comes. He comes walking up. It's like a little ridge, comes from the creek, the same way he did that one night. And he walked in. He came up to about 50, maybe 55 yards, right in the shooting lane, and then peeled over to the edge, the same area he went when I watched him walk away. And so I was like, no, please don't do this to me again. And he kind of messed around over there and started acting like he was going to walk up that little ditch and just leave. But he got to right at, I'd say, 35, 40 yards over there. And then it's like he just stopped. took a direct V line straight over to my shooting lane again. And he came over, and that's when, I got ready, got set up. I'm sitting there, and I'm like, he comes in. I was like, know your spots, shoot. I kind of was sitting there ready. And he came in. He was super calm. And he kind of looked around at those deer messing around because they were messing around behind him. And then he just went straight over, right into his shooting lane. He dropped down perfectly broadside. He put his head up and then just paused. And I was there. Boom. Perfect shot right behind the shoulder. Arrow went straight through. I kind of stuck my head out the blind and listened. He ran up a hill, and it was pretty dark at that time. It was like 7:30. So, I mean, like, you could see, but you couldn't see real far off. And then I heard him. It was just like a bunch of leaves rustling, just boom, 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 boom. And then it just got quiet. And I was just like, he's down. Like, he's 50 yards up on that hill. He is down. So I put all my stuff down. I immediately called Trevor. I called Trevor, and he picked up the phone, and he didn't even say anything. He said, "Is that deer dead?" And I said, "He's down." And he said, "I'm on the way." So I pulled out just in case, if there was anything wrong, giving him time. We waited probably 45 minutes, maybe right at an hour. It was past dark, and we went down there, found the arrow, right where I shot him. Found good blood on the arrow, and we started tracking. And then 40 yards up the woods, we started seeing blood going out both sides. And I was like, this deer's got to be dead. And we looked up, and I actually I brought a thermal ocular, and I started scanning. Trevor was looking at the blood, and I started scanning, and I was like, Trevor, he's right there. And we shined our light up there, and you can see his belly, white belly, and just antlers. They're just sticking up through the trees. And it was the best feeling ever, man. Everybody deserves to feel that at some point.
No, that's an awesome story. And man, I can't imagine how hard it was to see him walk away that one night. I bet that was heartbreaking. You said you lost sleep over it. I'm sure you did. But no, I got chills whenever you said you called Trevor. Like, that's one of the best things about hunting to me, is being able to share it with your family, with your friends, be able to be like send that text, "Hey, he's down," because it's almost like it takes a village to kill the deer. Obviously, you're the one that pulls the trigger on the the release and all, but definitely, like, you're talking to people, you're learning from people. I mean, it's a group effort, especially on the tracking side of things. But no, that's awesome. I don't even know how you made it through that night. You had to wait after watching him walk away. I would have lost my mind, man.
Yeah, and my wife can account for that, because I was just like pacing in the living room, like, just like, what could I have done different? Like, should I have done this? Should I have done that? This and that. And all she said was, she's like, you just got to keep going. She's like, just go every night. And that's what we talked about. My chance was that he was still on summer patterns. Like, he was hanging around with these bachelor bucks and still doing what they do in summer, when they don't have a worry in the world, before they, basically ghost you until a rut. And that's what it took. It took going every day that I had a chance, as soon as I got off work, and just putting in the time. And that's really the biggest thing that I've learned over the past several years, is it takes a little luck. Of course, it's preparation. A little luck goes into it, because the opportunity has to present itself, and the conditions have to be right. But you just got to go. The more you go, the more chances you have, and you're definitely not going to kill one sitting at the house. So the 2 years that I've had the most success, that's what the difference was for me, was going. I mean, every chance that I had to be in the woods, I was there. And that's been the biggest thing for me. 'Cause, I mean, I've learned a ton, obviously. I've had more hunts that I didn't see anything than I have that I have good hunts. But that was the biggest key to me so far that I've learned, is that you just got to go. The more chances you give yourself, the more the opportunities will show up. So.
Not for sure. I wanted to talk about, hunting over bait, because, that's, ever since it became legal in the northern zone in Georgia, that's something that everybody does. If you're not doing it, you're behind the eight ball.
Yeah.
Unless you have big ag fields, or, cornfields, things like that. I mean, but people up here, like, if you hunt in Dahlonega or around Lumpkin County, you're really hunting rural areas, usually a small tracts of land. Because, I mean, 18 acres is a good bit of land, but it's still, pretty small. So, I mean, you may have a food plot over there, but I talk to my buddies all the time about hunting over bait and how it's changed kind of the game. And people think, oh, if you hunt over bait, you can just hunt once and kill a deer. But you're exactly right. It takes a lot of time and effort. I killed my biggest buck last year, and I tell you, it was a cat and mouse game. I didn't have a cell camera at the time, but I think I sat like 30 or 40 hours before I ever got to see that deer on the hoof. But luckily, the first time I got to see him, I shot him. So like I was telling you, you having to see that deer and him walking away, I don't know how you did it because I couldn't hardly stand it to seeing that deer alive that I killed on the hoof for 5 minutes. I saw he came out quick, shot was quick, it was over. So having to see him, and especially that first time where you had to watch him, how long did you say he was out there for? 15, 20 minutes probably?
I mean, yeah, gosh, it's kind of a blur now, but I mean, if I try to think about this, the time that I knew he came in and then just when it gets dark, because that's about the time he moved in around 7-ish. That was kind of his time frame to start moving in that area. And I'd been getting pictures of him. I've had the earliest picture I had in the evening was around 6:15. So, I mean, he'd been moving early, but both those nights that I saw him, it was later. So in that 7 to, 7:30, 7:45, but it was a good 15, 20 minutes that I had to watch that deer. And I'm sitting there, my mind's just going a million miles an hour trying to think of what's he going to do, like, trying to think ahead of where he might be or what he's going to do so that I can be ready and I don't get surprised, because it happens like that. And it never did. And I was just blown away. I was like, how can I see that deer for that long and never get a chance? But that's just kind of the tough part of bow hunting too. Cause I mean, if I'd had a gun, I mean, I could, you could kill that deer multiple different times with a gun. It's just that kind of shows you the hard, how challenging, hunting with a bow can be, because the conditions and, everything, the scenario has to be just right for you to make a clean, safe, justified shot so that, you make a good shot so that you're doing that deer justice too. Cause I mean, I've never had to do that, thankfully, as far as make a bad shot and then have to live with it or go, to know I injured a deer like that with a bow by making a bad choice or a bad shot. But that's not something I ever want to do, and I hope I don't ever do. But that's one of the things I try to think through when I'm setting myself up. Do I give myself the best chance to make a clean shot so that the deer dies in a quick manner?
Right. Yeah, that's something else that I wanted to bring up about feeding, because normally if you use corn or deer candy or whatever kind of bait you use,
Yeah.
more often than not, you're going to have not just your target buck, but you're going to have smaller bucks, 4 or 5 does. I mean, you're going to have an extra set of eyeballs or 5 around you at all times.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like you said, there were times where if it would have been just your buck that first sit, you probably could have got him, but he was in between 2 other deer or behind a deer. And that's something that people don't think about whenever, oh yeah, you're hunting over bait or, whatever. Yeah, and bait obviously helps, but it adds its own set of obstacles, I guess, would be the best way to put it. Because you've got sketchy shots, you're going to have to like decide, okay, when is he going to be open? You're going to have to watch him like you did for, 10, 15 plus minutes, which is difficult. And yeah, I mean, it's the little nuances that you learn the more you do. And that's like in choosing, like you said, you killed him out of a ground blind, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And to be honest with you, what you're hitting the nail on the head right there, hunting over bait. Now, it brings deer in, but it creates many challenges too, because I mean, that scenario in itself was due to that funnel. And then to the fact that we created like a feeding spot right there, the fact that I had so many deer moving in is really what kept me from getting a shot that night. So yeah, it's tough. It may make some things, easier or, looked upon differently, but it also adds its own challenge, because that's exactly what happened to me that night. Is I had too many deer moving in, all going to the same spot in a very confined area. And that's really why I picked that blind, was because with so many deer moving in, it masked me that much more, so that if I did need to move or reposition myself, I could. Luckily, I had it kind of set up in the way I was set up in that specific area. It was pretty basic as far as, how I was going to shoot him. So I was able to be, set up almost perfect. If he came into the right way and faced the right direction, it was solid. It was set, and that's what happened. So.
Nice. And so that's, like I said, that's something that I wanted to bring up too. Like hunting in a ground, I do a lot of hunting out of a ground blind. They're easy to set up, easy to get in and out of. But whenever you've got a bunch of deer around you, you're concealed. Your leg, you don't have to worry about your legs. And if you're sitting up against the back wall of it, the light can't really hit you. So you're pretty well concealed. And I was gonna bring that up, so I'm glad you did. But ground blinds are definitely good, because some lock-ons, if you don't have like a good backdrop, you're out in the open, or even a climbing stand, depending on what kind of a stand, or if you have a cover or like a blind around it. If you've got that many extra deer eyeballs around you and you're trying to get ready to draw back, a blind is hard to beat.
Yeah. No, I've really grown. I've really enjoyed, I'd say the past 2 or 3 years, I've really used them a lot more for that reason. And plus too, the way deer like to sneak up on you from behind you and stuff like that, you don't get busted as easy. One, my wife likes to go, and it's easier for her obviously to get in there and whatnot. So I've really enjoyed, adding that into the list of things to do and set up. It's been a lot of fun learning what works for them. You can mask them really well, if you do it right. Their deer aren't freaked out by it. And that was the biggest thing in that area. Every time I did try to hunt up in a tree, I would find a good spot, but something always happened to where the deer weren't comfortable. Whether, I don't know if they were winding me or if something didn't look right to them. I never had a real good successful hunt in that area from, a climbing stand where I get up in the air, as far as to where I'm comfortable. Some people get, 20, 25 foot, 30, whatever. That's not me. I've never been one like that. I'm like that, 10, 12, 15 foot max. And so that's kind of something that anyway. So yeah.
All right, welcome back. Had a lapse in Zoom. Thank you for the issue, Zoom, but we are back. So what I wanted to bring up next, we've been talking about ground blinds and how those help, and just concealing, deer coming in from the back and all that kind of stuff. The next topic I had on my little list there was talking about learning about hunting. So we've touched on a little bit how he started later on in life at 18 or 19. I was lucky, my dad, I've been hunting. I remember taking naps in box stands when I was growing up, and 4 or 5 years old. And my mom, quite a few times her dad would tap us on the shoulder. All right, put your headphones on. We're about to shoot a deer, after taking a nap in the floor of a deer stand. So, I've been hunting since since I've been able to, since I've been able to stay still. But so it's interesting to see how learning has evolved for hunting. And definitely, I watch a lot of hunters on YouTube, the Seek One. They do a lot of the urban style hunting, which is kind of what you're doing. You have definitely a honey hole with 18 acres, but it is, anytime you're hunting in city limits, usually those deer are fairly untouched, not quite as hunted. They're hunted more than you think. I feel like everybody who has the Onyx or a Hunt Stand app and can see property owners, they're door knocking, they're finding out, they're getting in there. But you talked about hunting public a lot. So learning about hunting, obviously, it's a community deal. You said you talked to Trevor a lot. So part of it is, kind of the campfire talk, talking to your buddies. But I wanted to get into a little bit, just, what's your go-to if you wanted to learn something? Obviously you'll probably call Trevor, but past that, what's your go-to as far as like looking up, if you wanted to look up mock scrapes, how would you look up, or how would you research that kind of thing?
For me, like, you can always learn a lot reading and stuff like that. But for me, like, I get on and I find videos and stuff to where I watch somebody doing it, or they talk me through how to do something. Reverting back to that hunting public, I've learned just a ton of stuff I've learned through them watching their videos because, they don't just go out there, kill a deer and video it. They'll teach you and talk to you and show you the things of why they do this, why they do that. But for me, that's always kind of been something, if somebody hasn't shown me or if I haven't learned it through somebody, which because of kind of how, I came into hunting, I didn't have a lot of people, teaching me that as I grew up. It's always been something I've just kind of tried to self-learn. Watching videos, man. There's a lot of good information out there, stuff you don't ever think about. And a lot of it can be very simple, that really goes a long way. So for me, yeah, it's just getting online, finding videos where somebody is teaching and showing you how to do something. That's where I've learned the most.
Yeah, I think that's why YouTube hunting shows and people like the hunting public are so successful, is because they're not afraid to give you the details. They like you watch some of the shows on Outdoor Channel, they're trying to sell a product most of the time, and
Right.
they'll say, oh, we're using this certain kind of a buck bomb or this spray, and they're hunting how they manage places across the country. So it's like, now you could have been like spraying water and the deer still would have come in. It doesn't matter what you're using. But the hunting public, they're definitely down to earth. They do a good job of explaining and just breaking down barriers.
Yeah.
Being very open. There's multiple channels out there. I know the hunting public does a lot with the Hunting Beast, and a lot of those guys are kind of in the Midwest or the northern region of the country. So it's different than Georgia, but definitely still applicable. Yeah, I'm the same way though. I like to look up anything. I mean, you can learn how to do something with your car, or if you have a rattle or some kind of a noise, you can find a video on YouTube about it. Or if you wanted to fix something with your washer or dryer, it's on YouTube. And that's something that's very, like, I guess the last 5 or 10 years or so, like the amount of content to learn, especially hunting, has exploded on YouTube. And that's something that it's changing the landscape of hunting, but for a good way, for sure, for sure.
Is insane now. If you've encountered it, thought it, or anything, I mean, it's out there. Somebody else has, and somebody's put something up about it, which is pretty neat. I mean, it's pretty amazing if you think about it. Because what some people may learn over a span of 10 to 15 years hunting, and it takes them to figure that out. You can have that same scenario or question, go put it out online and have an answer that same night, and then start reiterating it and putting it into your own hunting stuff. And so, I mean, that's could just go back to what you're saying is of how you can advance your hunting so much faster now, because you don't have to necessarily learn it through failure. You can go see somebody else's online and they can tell you how to correct it.
Yeah, it's not just the old Monster Bucks videos of them hunting the Milk River in Montana, and all the famous, Bill Jordan and all those guys, David Blanton. You could learn some, but mostly you're just there watching giant deer get killed. But nowadays, it's like people are there to lift each other up, and it's a community deal. And like you said, it's just the information is there if you're willing to seek it out. The next thing I wanted to kind of dip into, I guess, before we wrap this thing up, is kind of your what you use, like your tools of the trade. I know broadheads are I don't want to say a dime a dozen, but broadheads are really opinionated. Some people are like, oh, it's got to be fixed blade, or it has to be a single bevel. The hunting public guys are big on the single bevel because they hunt from the ground a lot. They shoot the really super heavyweight arrows. So yeah, so go into like what's your bow setup, what's your broadhead setup, if you know your arrow weight, that kind of thing. So kind of your equipment, what you use.
Well, that's kind of another funny part about it. Normally, I shoot a Matthew compound, but I actually sold it last year. Needed some quick cash, and I actually killed this deer with my wife's crossbow, which is not something I've normally ever done. I got her that because it was something that she could use easily. She didn't really like using a gun, and of course, the technicality of using a compound wasn't really necessarily what she wanted as a somebody just getting started. So I killed with her crossbow. It's a Wicked Ridge. And I used a mechanical broadhead, Schwackers, and it did its job big time. I'd always shot Rage stuff with my own stuff. That's what I'd always use. I'd always liked that, but probably fell into more of the marketing that they use. They're a big name. But Daniel Tritt Sporting Goods, he pushed me to those Schwackers when I bought that crossbow for her. Man, firm believer in them now. I really like the setup they have on the band that holds the blades in. You can bump them around, knock them on stuff, and they don't come out where the rages. Sometimes, I mean, if the wind blows, those will fall out. So that was my setup. I'm not real sure on the weight. I don't want to tell you wrong on the arrow. So I don't want to mislead you anyway on that, but nothing too fancy. I mean, it was her setup. I shot it a bunch leading up to hunting season just to make sure it was, dialed in. And I mean, man, it was easy peasy. That thing's a tack driver. So, and it was, not 100% sure the model, but it was, just a base model crossbow, nothing fancy, nothing crazy as far as the speed. It was just a good bow for her to start out with. And it got the job done.
Nice. Yeah, I think I either saw that bow or you may have been there, or I was there when you picked it up. I saw it was a Wicked Ridge because I bought a new crossbow myself last year. I got a Barnett, but I shoot Schwackers for the same reason. Daniel at Tritz. Speaking of Tritz, I've got the hat on here. But yeah, Daniel is a firm believer. Him and his brother have killed a lot of animals with a Schwacker. I killed a doe, a bear, a buck. My wife killed a doe with the Schwackers. I mean, they're deadly thing. I mean, you would think that the entry hole wouldn't be quite what you want it with a Schwacker, but I mean, it does its job. The deer bleed good. I mean, it kills them. I mean, I have confidence in it, and that's kind of like, for example, my brother is in the process of changing broadheads right now, or thinking about changing, and we've been talking about it a lot. And I'm like, any broadhead out there will kill a deer. It's really goes down to confidence. If you have confidence in it, then you should probably shoot it. If you're not confident, then don't take it with you to the woods. So I mean, they're all deadly, but no, I'm a firm believer in Schwackers. But I mean, with a crossbow, the bolt's usually pretty heavy as it is. I think I'm shooting the Carbon Express pile drivers. They're some of the heavier ones, like grains per inch. But and crossbows, they shoot so fast. I mean, it really doesn't matter what you don't have to really focus on the weight as much as you do with the compound, because I mean, they're shooting 400 feet per second or more, most of them. Or I think mine's like 375 is what it's advertised. But I mean, at that speed, it really doesn't matter. I mean, if you get heavier, it'll be a little bit slower, but
yeah, that was one thing I was shocked about, is just the punch that arrow put on that deer. I mean, it sounded like an arrow hit concrete. I mean, it was just, it's brutal. So I was pretty impressed with what it did. Obviously, I mean, it got the job done, but that was the first time ever shooting a deer with a crossbow, and I mean, it was pretty brutal. So I mean, it definitely did its job. That's a deadly combo. So I definitely am all for that for the future. So, but yeah. I would like to get me another Matthews. I'm pretty particular.
Yeah. But yeah, something about bow hunting, man. It's more primal. You can hear, like, just hearing it hit the deer. Gun hunting's fun. I mean, it's obviously effective. But something about bow hunting, you can, it's quieter. You can hear it hit the deer, and like you said, when you hit it with a Schwacker, I mean, it is a noise to behold. And you can usually tell, like, if you don't hear that noise, you're like, probably didn't hit him that good. But no, that's one thing I like about bow hunting, is you just hear all the noises. You hear it hit the deer. You can tell more of what's going on. You're not like deaf after the shot. You're like, did I hear him fall? But yeah. So and then what do you have, one of like the see-through blinds, like the ones where you can see through all the panels, or is it a pretty basic ground blind?
No, mine's pretty basic. And honestly, I've actually, since I started doing that, I liked these so much that they're just the basic ones that they you can't see. It's not the one where you can see through the whole like wall of it.
Right.
Got the like the two-fold deal where it's Velcro, but you can let the flap down, and it's like camouflage where they can't see in, but you can see out in just your shooting lane. And what I did is I kept everything covered to where it was completely black except for right in front of me. And then there's like two smaller panels on the side that I used to just kind of let some more light in for me. And what I did is I just kind of pulled one corner down on my left side so that I had a shooting lane. Because, I mean, they advertise that you can shoot arrows through those, but I've just never liked the idea of it at all. I don't even want to try it just to see. So, of course, with a gun, that's a different story. But with a bow, I made sure I just pulled down a small portion, just enough for me to be able to, you know, have a shooting lane with no obstructions.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you. But most of the blinds I have that the mesh you can pull down, and it's like, oh, you can shoot through it. I'm like, no, I'm not going to, for sure not. But and that's one thing I like about blinds too is you can literally cater the windows exactly to, like, if you need to have one portion of a tree covered up, but on the other side you can see better, you can, you know, kind of shape the windows up on most of them, and I kind of
Right.
like that aspect. But yeah, love ground blinds, love bow hunting. It's a good time. But yeah, man, thanks for coming on. If you want to add any other details, you can. But I mean, I think we've kind of knocked it dead. Yeah.
No, man. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on here. I feel like once I killed that deer, I honestly I got more calls about that deer at work than I did tire questions. For like 2 days, I felt like I was a celebrity. So I mean, it was a cool feeling. Um, Definitely a deer of a lifetime. I mean, what a blessing to have a chance at a deer like that, have the stories to tell, and I mean, the fact that, you know, we're gonna try to send that deer in after that 60-day dry-in period, to get it scored officially and whatnot, and then just the chance for it to be, you know, top 2, 3, 4, whatever in Lumpkin County. I mean, that'll be something cool to have to say I did, something cool to tell my son that, you know, is on the way here in the next couple of weeks. A cool story to have to tell him, and yeah, it's a high bar I've set for myself moving forward to try to top that deer. But yeah, there's nothing better, man.
Yeah.
Deer hunting, it's the best thing ever.
Well, hey, early congratulations on that little one. I know that's going to be awesome for you. We've got 2 little girls. I can hear them screaming through the door. You can probably hear them on the recording a little bit, but they're in there raising Cain with their mama. But yeah, that's something you said. You know, you got more phone calls about the deer. That's one thing that's interesting about this town is, you know, we have one sporting goods store, and, you know, the stories of your deer and any big deer that's killed are circulated. Pictures are shared. I mean, I've sent your pictures of your deer. I've gotten pictures of your deer. Oh my gosh, you see the deer Tyler killed. You know,
Yeah.
it's very interesting, and it's like you are locally famous. You know, more so than before, but locally famous, local legend, if you will. For killing a deer like that, because I mean, anybody who hunts or has any, you know, inkling of deer in the county know that you killed it. You know, it's so you got your, you know, 15 minutes or 30 minutes or you know, a year long of fame, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, even like Andre Erich, I'm sure you've seen and heard about that deer.
Oh yeah.
170 inches, and that's what I told him. I was like, you're a local legend now, and he's not even from the area. But I'm like, that's killing deer like you killed and like he killed. That's, yeah, it'll be talked about for years for sure.
That's the funny thing, Eli, is, you know, I remember when he killed that deer, I remember seeing pictures of it, and I'm just like, good Lord, like, I can't imagine getting a chance at a deer like that. And you just never know. You know, I mean, you know, and, you know, fast forward, and then here you go, you get a chance yourself at a deer like that. So, I mean, it can happen to anybody. You know, I was just absolutely lucky and blessed that you know, he was in my area and I had the opportunity and chance to kill him, because I know there were several other people. I'm sure you probably heard there were many people hunting that deer. I was just the lucky one that got the chance and the opportunity. You know, everything lined up for me to get him, and I'm pretty grateful for that. So yeah, maybe we'll be able to top that one of these years.
Well, you never know. You can top them. You can top them next weekend. But yeah, man, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it, and we'll see you later.
Yep, thanks for having me, Eli. Have a good night, man.
The Bucktails Podcast, brought to you in part by Trick Sporting Goods in Dahlonega, Georgia.